7 years of cycling this wonderful, truly wonderful, miraculous 1,000-pound vehicle. And except for an accidental 2 or 3 week period about 3 years ago, it has been psychological torture, not to mention physical. The point isn't to complain. It's been a blessing. But here's why it has been psychological torture, torment. Humanity, that capacity within us, eyesight is a capacity, smell is a capacity, taste is a capacity, hearing is a capacity, humanity is a capacity. They're all DNA given. They can be destroyed. All of them can be destroyed. They cannot be created, though they can be redeveloped. They can be healed if damaged in many cases, not in all, but in some cases they can be through rehabilitation. They can be rehabilitated. Well, all credit to James' biological father, who was ragingly humane, and by growing up in that environment, James was able to understand that the defining two features of Jesus are his raging humanity. He was ragingly humane. And his understanding that was the divine, that humanity kept alive or brought back alive within us is life itself. And when that goes away, if you have gained the whole world and lost your humanity, you have lost your life. If you have gained the whole world and lost your humanity, you have lost your life. Well, my dad never lost his life. Because of that, the life and example of Jesus grasped me. But my full understanding, or the fullness of my understanding, may have come with my understanding of cycling. This morning, I have been rendering myself meaningless. I've been rendering myself irrelevant. And that has taught me something central to humanity. Humanity is meaningfulness. There is no humanity without meaningfulness to the larger environment. And there is no meaningfulness without understanding enough about the environment and how it works that one can make oneself meaningful. One can thereby maintain their existence as meaningful. Now, this is all correct and this is all true of possibly every life form, and certainly all of the higher, so-called higher mammals. Their mammalian brain is a understanding and meaningfulness, some of which is hereditary. The capacity is hereditary, DNA given. The understanding is somewhat hereditary. Information about migration routes in some species of mammal is largely inherited, or is to a substantial degree inherited. How to be a dolphin, how to be a bird, how to fly, much of that is inherited. DNA transfer. But it is understanding nonetheless. So obviously, understanding does not have to be conscious, but understanding has to be present. A la those species that know their migration routes, quite possibly the location of water sources, because that understanding is within them, even though they are unconscious of it. And with that understanding, they can take meaningful action, even though, again, they may not understand that it is meaningful action. They may not be conscious that it is meaningful action. But it is probably easy for most of us to realize that animals, mammals, dogs that we love, for example, have a confused state that they can enter. They don't know what's going on, and you can tell by the twitch of their eyes they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure it out so that they can be in an environment where they can take meaningful action. And so it is with humans. What makes all this something that humans move away from, being humane, the aliveness of being humane, even understanding that that is our normal, natural state, is because we can so change the environment, we can so make it foreign, unknown, relatively unknowable, that our lives become relatively, well, actually meaningless as far as life-giving environment goes. So we detach ourselves collectively from life, from that which gives life. And in a desperate grasp for some substitute, we attempt to create meaning out of that which is not life-giving. Rather, it's life-taking. It's cancerous. Our social relationships, our social hierarchies, our man-made domination structures, our human-made stuff, all of which are cancer because they all exploit the environment as cancer does. Eventually, we're at that point now, killing the host. And our lives are so empty of true meaning, and therefore our humanity is at best in a coma state and more likely dead, the way eyes that are destroyed are dead. That we cannot gratify ourselves. Joy being the reward for active humanity, a feeling of being alive, the reward for active humanity, the joyful, abundant life that Jesus spoke of. So one cannot get those life-sustaining rewards. Joyful, abundant life. The psychological experience of joyful, abundant life without being ragingly humane, without the being of raging humanity. And raging humanity, our mammalian nature, is not possible without meaningful understanding of how to serve. And we have rendered our environments so complex They are so ever-changing that without either tremendous effort to maintain understanding or involvement or focus within the project of being humane, whatever our understanding in the environment is, refusing to be less than humane, cobbling together whatever tiny understanding we might have into living our humanity, being our humanity. And this must be a feature of humanity. It certainly is a feature of our mammalian brain. It tortures the one within who it resides when the understanding is insufficient. And it has sensors that it is not aligned with that which is life-giving, that which is good, all the features of humanity. And it tortures the individual mammal so that it goes about the task. It is dragged into the task, unwillingly, if you will, involuntarily, if you will. It can't resist the task, trying to painful way of realigning life for itself and, more importantly, for the environment, particularly that of its fellow creatures and its fellow species. This really does relate to cycling. Oh my goodness, does it? Well, humanity has created such an unknown environment and relatively unknowable, unnatural environment for itself, where all the cues that may be handed down biologically appear to be irrelevant and are not only irrelevant to the environment, but may cause, when activated, hostile reaction from the environment, as we can see with people like Julian Assange, when they act, when they behave in a way that is helpful to life, helpful to the rest of the species. They put a big target on their chest. Because the subhumans that we've made of ourselves don't understand what is actually life, and therefore what is actually life-giving, our life-killing environment that we've created, we think is life. So we attempt to protect that which is killing us. So we have an environment, we 2024 humans, that is entirely, completely, deadly perverse, giving exactly the rewards that are contrary to joyful, abundant life, contrary to our humanity, punishing our humanity, rewarding our inhumanity. Well, how does this relate to cycling? As mentioned at the beginning of the first, more philosophical, metaphysical section, the mammalian brain experiences life itself as being meaningful. And with the exception of about 3 weeks in and around the Trans-Iowa race, James realized yesterday and a little more today, he has been meaningless. Cycling, his role in trying to contribute to the the movement of this 1,000-pound payload that pedals like it is 3,000 pounds. He has been not totally starving. He has been keeping his brain in torture state, which the mammalian brain does when it says to itself, we don't understand what's going on. And when we don't understand what's going on, we are going to torture you until you figure it out. Unless you're a human, in which case you can drug yourself or distract yourself to death. But no credit to James. He's pretty unwilling to do that because he knows what joyful, abundant life that he just, no credit to him, is unable to detach himself from his mammalian brain, his humanity, and thereby lose the hope of recapturing that joyful, abundant life. And how has he been rendering himself irrelevant as a cyclist? How is he all of a sudden returning himself from meaninglessness? Or rather, how is he mercifully being returned from the agony that the mammalian brain puts one in when they don't know how to play a meaningful role? How is James being transitioned into meaningfulness? Well, first of all, he was using the throttle like a drug. Whether it is throttle coming off of the torque sensor in the crank or at his right hand, he's been using it like a drug, which has been separating him from the reality of the mass of the vehicle. And to be meaningful, James must keep himself where his relationship to that mass is in truth physically meaningful. So just enough throttle that what James can do to meaningfully contribute to the movement of this mass is within the realm of making a difference. So if we're climbing and there's too little throttle, we will decelerate. If there's too much throttle, we will accelerate irrespective of what James does. And although that may be pleasurable, it is not joyful. It is without joy because it is meaningless. Even if James is flailing all over the place, it is psychologically meaningless and therefore joyless, and therefore the body either figures out how to detach the humanity entirely to shut it up. James is relatively incapable of, no credit to him, or it just drives him and drives him and drives him. What's going on here? So he's been using throttle as a drug without knowing it, without understanding that's what he was doing. And he hasn't been doing it entirely for sure, but he's been doing it substantially. And yes, it makes life so much easier, and it makes it so much less meaningful. So the central joy of traditional cycling, upright or recumbent, may be that it is a near perfect machine for rendering one meaningful. It is a feedback machine. It immediately tells one that what they are doing is meaningful, or the lack of what they're doing is meaningless. Instantaneous, tactile, every part of the stroke of the cycle they will get feedback from. And there's a lot of instrumentation on this vehicle, and James has been obsessive compulsive, not quite, but almost, at understanding the metrics, and his flailing contributes somewhere around 10 or 15% of the energy to move this vehicle. But it is experienced by the body as flailing, has been experienced by the body as flailing. That is meaningless, relatively meaningless. What the hell are we doing here? Is it making any difference? We can't tell. So this is a monstrously difficult learning situation, because the feedback is infinitesimal. And if anyone has ever figured out cycling, where one has somewhere between 1/6 and 1/9 the feedback of a traditional bicycle, James certainly hasn't been able to find it. He's had to hope that his mammalian brain would lead him to figure it out. And I think it finally, yesterday and today, got us there. So what are the key elements of exiting this 7-year torture chamber of meaningless relationship to or with Saul and me as a effectively 2,000-pound mass or vehicle item? We have been protecting ourselves unknowingly from a meaningless relationship to that mass with throttle. It, in truth, ultimately didn't matter what we did, moment to moment, in terms of moving the mass. We had no meaningful, true relationship to it. Item. Only yesterday, or within the last couple of days, did we appreciate that so the leverage point is from 11 to 1 o'clock, the mechanical leverage point. So if one wants the highest return for effort, it is to be delivering power at that 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock place. And secondarily, or maybe fourth level importance, but significant, is to be applying return pressure at the... So I was not using I was not aware. It was not teaching me. It was not giving me feedback regarding those high leverage areas, 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, because there's only potentially 15%, 7% to 15% of the feedback of a conventional bicycle. You can barely feel what's going on. And when you're flailing, even that ability to have tactile feedback is much more further defeated because there's no smooth relationship to the crank arms. It's all jerky. Nothing can be felt. Not complaining at all. So not only have I been rendering myself meaningless through the use of the throttle, I haven't known to proactively render myself meaningful. To be sure that there is not so much throttle that I'm not participating in the deceleration or the acceleration or the maintenance. And with all this, my learning curve is almost instantaneous, well, relatively instantaneous to the last 4 years. The fine-tuning that's possible with these mechanics in mind and these principles in mind is my only relationship to the pedals, that 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock and the 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock? No. I have a relationship of some value from 9:30 or 10 o'clock until, and maybe I'll probably learn how to do some sort of spinning action between and 8:30 and 9:30. But they are very, very different places of leverage. Another item, my relationship to the pedals has been one of trying to push them over the top, primarily. But there's another. So, as gospel has been slowly, patiently trying to teach me, there's the machine, the physical aluminum and steel machine. But there's, just as important, the man machine with muscles and bones and ligaments. And it too has strengths and weaknesses and aspects to be harnessed. And I'm thinking about the muscles on the underside of the leg for quite some time now. I've known theoretically that they were the strongest, but how to harness them? And only this morning did the best answer yet by far come to mind. They can be used to drag the pedal forward over the top, really from that 9:30 to 2:30 and back from the 2:30 to 8:30 position. And a huge challenge has been, gigantic effort, mental and physical, has gone into timing where to begin the push over the top. Oh my goodness, and how far to extend it. And that is largely eliminated. The need for that energy is largely eliminated when the relationship to the pedals is dragging them from the 9:30 position to the 2:30 position and back from the 3:30 position to the 30 position. Oh, it becomes very, very tactile. The primary relationship over the top is at the heel, and it can find itself as though it is dragging a cloth from back by the perineum forward, dragging it forward is infinitely easier for the body to figure out than pushing over the top. Damn, these town roads are just a nightmare. Oh man. Civil engineers just carving up every road as soon as it's laid. And refusing to be irrelevant to the movement of the mass sets up an incredibly virtuous, well, it sets up a cycling relationship, which is incredibly virtuous. Incredibly virtuous. Can't be relevant if I don't feel what's going on relative to the mass, its force on me, and my force on it. And if I am attuned to that, then I pretty much can't be not attuned to every space in the cycle at between my legs and the physical crank, where I might contribute to that mass. And it's largely, the relationship is much in the imagination, but not entirely in the imagination. And it got me back into something that was so joyful back in the time of Iowa. It was really central. And that is being in a playful, agonizing relationship to our mass in rolling hills. And James, if you have to participate meaningfully in establishing enough momentum to get to the top of this hill, it's pretty exhausting. Why do you want to invest energy in achieving speed at the crest of the hill? It will gain you nothing except time, which you don't care about in terms of speed of travel. And you can get acceleration on the other side of the hill. So provide just enough energy to just reach the top of the hill, maybe 2 miles an hour. And then turn off the motor. And between gravity and just your force, now you can have 100% tactile feedback. Muted because you're not trying to accelerate a 100 payload, you're trying to accelerate a 2,000 pound payload effectively with all our internal and rolling resistance. But still, it's undiluted change. It's the most pure feedback environment you can get. Although another benefit, virtue of refusing to be other than in a true relationship with the momentum of and the mass of the vehicle moving through space, as you aggressively manage the amount of power coming from the vehicle on a long, slow climb like we're doing right now. It is almost like no motor at all, because the motor is held at such a constant that everything the body does or does not do to maintain our momentum or contribute to it is meaningful, and there is a tiny residue of tactile feedback, including feedback from muscles that now do not experience themselves as flailing, but meaningfully contribute. So their feedback becomes meaningful instead of just meaningless. And after 7 years with a brief interlude, those 3 weeks in Iowa that we didn't understand, we can begin to learn what it is to meaningfully cycle this 2,000-pound vehicle. And I'm fairly sure that the elements are the mechanical cycling elements. Drag a cloth forward, a cloth conveyor belt forward, largely with what feels like your heels, although it's a virtual relationship. It's not a mechanical relationship at the heel, but it's a tactile virtual relationship. Drag that forward, and the muscles that engages, what are they? Are they hamstrings? It is primarily the hamstrings that do that. So that's one element. Another element, boy, this is going to take a lot of learning, is how to provide a bit of an additional burst to that at the high leverage point of the arm. The 11 o'clock to the 12 o'clock is where the greatest mechanical advantage is. I think a fun thing will be, as long as I can remember that it is just maybe an additional 2% is contributing a tiny bit of energy at the point where the cloth that we're dragging forward and slightly backward with the returning foot, giving just a little bit of a tweak with the outgoing foot, pulling the cloth down at its point where it's going down and pushing it up at the point where it's coming near to the perineum with the foot, of course. And again, the mechanics of this cloth are aligned with the truth. As long as James aggressively keeps the power dynamics, motor and momentum, at such a point as power at this cloth, energy going into this cloth belt, is truly relevant to the momentum of the vehicle, accelerating through space. And given drag and mass and gravity, except in situations of more than percent downgrade, energy going into that cloth belt or not is factually relevant. It can become, for 7 years, it has been irrelevant from a tactile standpoint. We've been able to make no sense of what to do. But with this as an organizing mechanism, we now have some sense of what to do. Cycling. Wow. If this is what I think it is, this is really amazing. Iowa, those magical 2 or 3 weeks were a relationship to a flywheel. So close, but another 4 years to recapture it. We thought that the flywheel was the vehicle. A flywheel directly somehow that was the vehicle mass. And it's not. It's an intermediate flywheel. And it is whatever momentum, forward moving, forward rotating mass in that flywheel that comes up against the rope that we are reeling in from directly ahead of us. And that's what pulls us forward. But we are not pulling on the rope. We are supplying energy to the flywheel that, through some sort of automatic clutch arrangement, comes against the flywheel. Now, we're that clutch arrangement to some degree. And when we go mechanical, we have now defeated the free rotation of the flywheel. We've stalled it, and the body somehow knows, and it goes crazy, as rightly it should. The flywheel is, who knows, 40 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 100 pounds maybe, and at relatively slow cadence, we are in a relatively non-geared relationship with that 40-pound flywheel. And when we're at a faster cadence, we're in a geared relationship with that 40-pound flywheel. Smaller bites that can equal greater force on the flywheel or not. In a conventional bicycle, I suspect, that is without a 800-pound 800-pound trailer, I suspect that the natural relationship is this flywheel relationship. And even without intermediary, although I don't know that, but much less intermediary, there's a possibility that the body can manhandle itself with that gearing. There's no possibility that this body, and probably any body, can manhandle a 1,000-pound payload. Of course the body's going to get discouraged and rebel. No frickin' way. But to a 40-pound flywheel, the more energy we put into that flywheel, the more can go against our travel. You bet. And oh my goodness, in terms of the problems we've had, jerkiness, trying to wrestle rather than cycle, where to start, where to finish, are all solved from the perspective of the last 3 years and don't become issues from the perspective of doing it right to begin with. Oh, this is really extraordinary. And last night was spent capturing what we thought was the final solution. And it turns out it was just a stepping stone to where we are right now. It wasn't the final solution. No offense to yesterday, thank you. But what a learning experience. Not just for cycling, but for life. One little tweak to the concept, one little bit off, and it's no longer aligned with reality. And what it's aligned with is misery. Not that misery is that important, but oh, this is really fabulous.